Welcome to the District Court Show. This is a production of the 10th Judicial District. I'm Judge Steve Halsey from Wright County. My co-host is Judge Elizabeth Strand, also from Wright County. This is a special program because we are going to do an interview with Chief Justice Lorie Gildea and Jeff Shorba, who is the State Court Administrator. And we're taping this program at the National Sports Center in Blaine, where one of the regional meetings of the Minnesota State Bar Association is taking place. And our two guests are speaking to the attorneys and judges at this meeting. So first of all, I want to welcome Chief Justice Gildea and Jeff Shorba. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
I'm going to give you a brief introduction, viewers, and that is Chief Justice Gildea is a graduate of the University of Minnesota Morris and the Georgetown Law School. She was appointed as a justice following a brief stint as a Hennepin County District Court judge, appointed as a justice on the Supreme Court on January 11, 2006, and appointed Chief Justice July 1 of 2010 and was elected in 2012. And Jeff Shorba has been the State Court Administrator since July of 2012. Prior to that was Deputy State Court Administrator for about 10 years. And Jeff is a graduate of Carleton College and Harvard Law School. So let's start a little bit on your background and experience. So Chief, if you could go first.
Yes, thank you for having us today. It's great to be with you. So I was a lawyer for about 20 years, a courtroom lawyer for about 20 years before I became a judge. I started my law practice at a big law firm in Washington, D.C., where I did almost exclusively business litigation, lawsuits for businesses, and really represented clients in courtrooms all around the country. In 1993, I came home to Minnesota and had the honor and privilege of representing the university in lawsuits, and I did that for about 11 years, and then I was a prosecutor for a while in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office when Senator Klobuchar was our Hennepin County attorney, and then I became a judge after that.
And I'm sure viewers are going to want to know what town in Minnesota you're from, because you always mention
Yes, thank you for asking. I'm from Plummer, Minnesota. It's a town in the northwestern corner of our state, and 292 people live in Plummer.
Okay. I'm glad we got that in. Jeff, if you could tell us just a little bit about your background before you came to the State Court Administrator's office.
Sure. After law school, I came back to Minnesota and I did a clerkship for then Chief Justice Peter Popovich on the Minnesota Supreme Court. And then, like the chief, I went out to Washington, D.C. I was in private practice for a number of years. And then I began work for the Justice Department. And when I got an offer from the Justice Department, I had an offer to work for the federal prison system, which was very interesting, doing constitutional law 24 hours a day. So I was there for almost a decade with the federal prison system, but then again, sort of a similar path. Decided Minnesota was the place I wanted to live, and I came back to Minnesota. I worked briefly for the Minnesota Department of Corrections as their legal counsel before the job opened up with the state court system. So.
Okay, and you were appointed about 2 years ago, correct?
Yes, it has been. Yep.
What does your job entail? Could you explain what you do? Also, how many judges are there in Minnesota and on the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court?
Sure. Well, we have 315 judges statewide. There are 19 judges on the Court of Appeals and 7 justices on the Supreme Court. And my job as the State Court Administrator is to sort of oversee the administrative side of the court system. We're a large operation. We have 2,500 employees across the state. We have a budget of about $290 million annually that the legislature appropriates, which, even though it's a large number, it's only about less than 2% of the state budget for the third branch of government. So we operate in 101 locations across the state, actually more than any other part of state government, geographically diverse. So my office works with our 10 judicial districts and our district administrators to handle the financial and human resources and our whole IT structure across the state to make sure that we're keeping the branch operating in as much of a unified method as we can, and hopefully doing well with the tax money that we get from the legislature.
That's a lot to oversee. What are the present budgetary challenges that you see in this state?
Well, just like every other part of state government, when the recession hit Minnesota, the judicial branch was also affected. And so as a result of reduced funding, we had to reduce our staffing. We had to close some courthouses part of the week. We certainly saw issues with filings being delayed and other kinds of things. So we had to take steps in the branch to deal with that funding shortfall. Thankfully, as a result of support from the public and the bar and others, during the last budget cycle, we were able to get additional resources from the legislature. So that helped us. Our staff and our judges went for 5 years without any pay increases. So like other parts of state government, we suffered, but right now we're on fairly solid footing, although our budget is about now at the same level it was in 2008. So we're about stable for that year, but it was a long 5-year drought in terms of resources.
And Chief, you've been on the Supreme Court long enough to have gone through this pretty bad recession and then somewhat of a recovery. And how has that affected the operations of the Supreme Court, just the Supreme Court itself and the Court of Appeals?
Well, in terms of the appellate courts, the impact on the case processing is felt in the same way that it's felt in the trial court. I mean, the caseload is smaller at our level, but the absence of resources is definitely felt in terms of the length of time it takes to get the cases through the system, and that really matters to the people involved in those cases. After all, each case, there's a real person, there are real people involved in these cases, and we need to get them resolved in the most expeditious way that we can so that the people feel heard, that the process has been meaningful to them, and that they understand the outcome.
Before we talk about what happens at the Supreme Court, how cases are handled, you as the Chief Justice, you were mentioning to me before we started the program that you were at a pardon board meeting yesterday.
Yes.
What other commissions or boards are you on because of your position as the Chief Justice?
Well, from time to time, the legislature will appoint the Chief Justice to various things. The Capitol is being renovated right now, and there's a commission that's overseeing the Capitol renovation. I serve on that. Issues of security are being studied for the Capitol complex, and there's a commission that's looking at that question for the Capitol complex, and I serve on that commission. So there are various functions. I'm the head of a branch of government, and so are there various things that come up from time to time that I'm asked to be involved in, and that's a very exciting and interesting part of my job.
Okay.
Could you then move into what types of cases the Supreme Court of Minnesota hears? Some, it's my understanding, are mandatory. You must hear these types of cases. Others, it's at the court's discretion. Could you describe that process?
Yes, there's essentially 5 ways you can get your case to the Minnesota Supreme Court. And I'll give you just a little bit of background, your viewers just a little bit of background. One of my colleagues on the court talks about the court system in Minnesota as though it were a 3-layer cake. The bottom layer of the cake is the biggest layer. That's the trial courts where you serve. That's where the juries are and where the witnesses come and swear to tell the truth. And we get about 1.5 million cases or so filed into the trial courts every year in Minnesota. The middle layer of the cake is the Court of Appeals. They get about 2,700 every year that are filed in that layer. And the top layer of the cake is the Supreme Court. And we get about 700 cases filed every year. So in terms of the 5 ways your case can get there, most of our cases are cases that we choose to decide. And they come to us on what's called a petition for review from the middle layer of the cake, the Court of Appeals. And they can be any kind of case, civil case, criminal case, divorce case, case involving children, any kind of case. One side or the other is unhappy about the result from the Court of Appeals, and they ask our court to take it. That's the vast majority of our docket. It's discretionary. But we do have some mandatory cases, some case types that we have to hear. First-degree murder is an example. So if you go through the trial court and you have been found guilty of first-degree murder and you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, your appeal comes automatically to our court, and we have to hear it. It's not discretionary with us. Lawyer discipline, judicial discipline. If a client thinks that a lawyer has misbehaved, they file a complaint. Those cases originate with the Minnesota Supreme Court. And often, if we need facts found, we'll appoint someone to find the facts, but we ultimately decide whether the judge or the lawyer misbehaved and what discipline to impose. Another kind of case that falls within our original jurisdiction, which means it starts with us, it doesn't start at some other court, cases involving elections. And sometimes we're drawn into those before the election happens. There may be a dispute about whether someone should be on the ballot or not. And so we are called to make decisions about that process. And then sometimes we're called to make decisions involving the election after the election has happened. So that's a type of case that originates with us. There are also separate court systems in Minnesota for tax disputes. There's a tax court. Appeals in the tax court come automatically to our court. And there's a separate court system for workers who are injured on the job, workers' compensation. And so appeals in those cases come automatically to the Supreme Court.
And, I'm sorry, Judge Halsey.
No, go ahead.
Members of the community who wish to watch, these are oftentimes presented to you by oral argument.
Yes.
Is there a means or for the members of the community to watch these oral arguments and, in addition to that, to review and read through your decisions?
Yes. We do have, of course, all of our proceedings are public proceedings, and people are welcome and encouraged to come and attend and observe oral argument. Television cameras are allowed to come into our court proceedings, and so there may be news coverage. We also, on our website, have streaming of all of our oral arguments, and so you can go and watch the oral argument in a case. And we have, as part of our court calendar that comes out in advance, there's a little issue summary. We, of course, think all of our cases are fascinating. But if you're interested in coming over, or some of your viewers are interested in coming over, you can look on the website and see the issue summary, and then you can read about the case and see if it might be interesting for you to come and watch it live or look at it later on your computer.
And then every year, a couple of times, the Supreme Court goes out and hears arguments outstate, I guess I'll call it. And we had the pleasure of having the Supreme Court in Buffalo in 2009. And interestingly enough, one of our newer judges, it was a case that she had tried as an Anoka County Assistant County Attorney and ended up going to the Supreme Court, heard in Buffalo, and she was a trial judge there. So that was very interesting. Talk about how that process happens. Maybe, Jeff, I know your office is involved with that as well.
Yeah, the court goes out, we take our show on the road, so to speak, twice a year. We go to a high school in the metro area in the spring, and we go to a high school that's not in the metro area in the fall. And it's a great opportunity for us really to engage the larger community and let people see what we do. Courts in Minnesota don't belong to judges and lawyers, they belong to the people. And so it's critically important that we as judges and justices get out and talk with the people and let them see what we do. And these outreach visits to the high schools are just one of the many examples that the judges in the branch are engaged in terms of engaging the community.
One of the things that we do before those oral arguments is members of the bar, attorneys, spend time in the schools, actually with the classroom of kids, talking about the case, making sure that they understand it, are aware of what kind of questions are going to come up, and understand the proceedings. And then we also, when we go into Greater Minnesota, do a community dinner the night before where the justices are there with anyone from the public who wants to come. And it's really exciting, and we've been so fortunate because teachers and principals and others from high schools have been so enthusiastic about welcoming us to their schools, so it's been great.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's been a real highlight of the 12 years I've been on the bench to have had the Supreme Court come out, because the students were they were very much into it and asking questions and listening to the arguments, so it was very interesting.
Well, and for us, it's just inspiring. I mean, people worry about the future. Spend some time with some high school students. I mean, these are our future leaders. It's really, really inspiring.
Yeah. We are going to take a 2-minute break for a public service announcement, and we'll be right back.
You still texting?
I gotta let daycare know that I'm running late. They charge if you're late. And I'm not usually one of those people to text and drive, and I was almost done with my text when that car came out of nowhere.
You still veered in oncoming traffic. And that text message, it never got through.
There's a reason it's illegal to text and access the web while driving.
Hey! What? Dude, slow down. You don't act like this in real life. Why would you do it behind the wheel? What? Minnesota law enforcement agencies are on the lookout for aggressive drivers. You could be fined or possibly lose your license. Are you that guy? Learn how to deal with aggressive driving at mndot.gov/aggressive driving.
Hey, come on, can't you go any faster?
Welcome back to the District Court Show. This is a production of the 10th Judicial District. I'm Judge Steve Halsey from Wright County, and our guests are Chief Justice Lorie Gildea and State Court Administrator Jeff Shorba. So Chief, if you could talk then about when a case is accepted or comes to your court on appeal, how is it discussed, when is oral arguments scheduled, who is determined to write the opinions, that type of thing?
Yes, so your case is at our court. And the vast majority of our cases, we tee up, so to speak, through an oral argument. And argument sounds like it's a mean thing, but it's not. It's just like a conversation, just similar to what we're doing now, where the lawyers come and present their arguments. So the argument date, you can really back up everything from there. So in advance of the argument, the court gets access to all the materials in the case, and oftentimes a lot has happened in the case by the time it gets to us. We'll get boxes and boxes of transcripts in front of the trial court and the jury proceedings and all the exhibits. And so we get all of that. And then the lawyers submit written arguments to us. They submit briefs, and I don't know why we call them briefs because they never are. But they submit their written arguments to us. And so all 7 of us have access to all of that information. One of the 7 of us is randomly assigned the case to really dig in and do a soup to nuts examination, figure out really what happened, and read all the cases that the lawyers bring to our attention and all the cases that are relevant that perhaps weren't brought to our attention in the briefs, and do an analysis of the case and prepare what we call a bench memorandum. And everybody on the court then gets a copy of that bench memorandum 1 week before the case is argued. And in that memo, the justice to whom the case has been randomly assigned makes a recommendation as to how the case should come out. Should we affirm or agree with the result below, or should we reverse? What should happen? So there's a recommended outcome. All 7 of us get that. We all do our own homework, and then we come onto the bench and have the conversation with the lawyers. And there's a lot of give and take with the attorneys about what the issues are, and really some testing that goes on. Justice Sam Hansen used to describe our court as a hot court, and I wasn't really sure what that meant. I think what he meant was we ask a lot of questions, and we do. It's a great conversation. It lasts about an hour. And then as soon as we're done with our oral argument calendar for the day, we usually have 2 cases, the 7 of us go back into the conference room and we make a decision in the case that same day. And that the decision-making process starts a little bit during the oral argument. You can hear from some of the questions that the justices are asking, perhaps what they're thinking about the case or what they're troubled by in the case. And so then we go back into the conference room. It's just the 7 of us in there. And the justice to whom the case has been randomly assigned starts the discussion and summarizes the case and makes a recommendation as to how the case should come out and explains why. And then we go around the room in order. We do everything in order of seniority. Oh, okay. And we take our turn and speak about what we think. Do we agree with the recommendation or not? And why. It's a very thoughtful, deliberative process, somewhat formal. We address each other as Justice so-and-so. We don't interrupt each other. We just really listen. Understanding that that's such an important part of our job is we're not deciding these cases alone. We have 6 others, really smart, hardworking people to draw on, and we need to listen to them, and we need to be open to being persuaded and learning from them. So we go around the room then, and the chief speaks last. And then when this formal process is over, then there's often a more free-flowing sort of tug and pull testing discussion that goes on. Do we really think this rule makes sense? Let's change the facts. And if the rule is such, does that make sense if we change the facts? At some point, it's my obligation as chief to end it, because we got to do something else, move on to the next case, and to sum up where we are. And if the justice to whom the case was assigned has a majority, which for our court is 4, the vast majority of our, well, I shouldn't say the vast majority, but most of our opinions are unanimous. We're not always unanimous. Sometimes we're even 4-3, I mean, pretty divided. Sometimes it happens. But if the justice to whom the case was assigned has a majority, then that justice will write the opinion for the court. If not, then I, as Chief Justice, will assign the opinion to someone else. The court makes its decisions in writing. We issue opinions and orders in our cases so that people can see what the rule is and why. So once we've reached a decision and we know who the authoring justice is, then the writing process starts. And it can take us a little bit of time we're writing, hopefully, to stand the test of time.
Does the writer then have the majority that joins with the writer review that and ask for edits?
Yes. So then what happens is, let's just say that Judge, that you were assigned to write the majority opinion. So you go back to your chambers and you work with your law clerk, who's a newly minted lawyer, who helps you craft the document, and you may go back and forth with your law clerk several times on a draft before you're ready to circulate it. But then it circulates to all the other members of the court, and everyone has the opportunity to propose edits, and sometimes can be really tedious, right? When you're getting edits from 6 other people. Right. But it's always helpful. And then everyone has to weigh in too. There's a circulation cover sheet where we have to initial, and you have to weigh in on which side you're on, and sometimes you change your mind. I mean, we all know it's easier to say something than it is to write it down and have it really make sense. And so sometimes you change your mind in the review process, and then a case maybe it flips, and then we start the writing process over again. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen.
How about if you're in the minority side? Do you meet with the other person that's in minorities, or peer persons, and then?
So the way that works is, if we just assume again that you're writing the majority, and let's say that I'm writing the dissent. So you would work up your majority and you would send it to me, and I would write my dissent. And then I send it back to you so that you can respond to the arguments I make.
Okay.
And we go back and forth like that, literally, until we're exhausted, and we've said everything there is to say. We've gone down all the hallways and opened all the drawers and checked all the places and cubby holes, and we've said it all. Then the 2 documents circulate together to the other members of the court. So that's how that works.
It's quite a process.
It is.
That sounds
and we do our
fascinating.
best to be transparent about it among the 7 of us, because we feel strongly it's not my decision, it's not your decision, it's a decision of the Minnesota Supreme Court.
I went back and looked at a video that I did an interview with Chief Justice Russell Anderson back in 2007, and I think this is a quote, and he said, this was from Justice Sam Hansen. He said, the best thing about serving on the Supreme Court is having 6 colleagues to share in making decisions. And the worst thing was trying to get 7 judges to agree on anything.
Well, sometimes that's certainly true. I take great pride in the work of my colleagues and the privilege I have to serve with them. We are called to make some very difficult decisions in really important cases, and I really draw on the strength and wisdom of my colleagues.
Okay, Beth.
Jeff, the Chief was mentioning submission of documents, and at every of the 3 tiers that the Chief referenced earlier, in the 3 tiers of courts, there is an initiative now in the state of Minnesota for e-filing, something that has been an undertaking for the last 2 years or so, and it's very exciting. Could you just describe what e-filing is and what the future of access to court records looks like in this state?
Sure. 2 years ago, we began an initiative we're calling eCourt Minnesota, and it was an effort to transform the court system from a paper-based system to electronic documents. Just like other parts of our life, electronics and technology is changing the way we go to the doctor, or the way we get our groceries, or the way we do our banking, or get an airline ticket. And the courts are trying to keep up with the rest of our culture in terms of moving towards this environment. So we began an initiative 2 years ago. We're about halfway through transforming this paper-based system to electronics for the benefits not only of our staff and our judges in terms of ease of use, but also for the public, so that there's remote access to documents. You don't have to travel to a courthouse, stand behind a counter, wait in line to get a document. It'll allow attorneys to easier file and serve each other in litigation. It is a transformational change. One of the things I'm proud of for our court system is we've innovated and kept up with change over the decades of our court system, but this is really one of the largest changes, not only for the culture of our staff and judges, changing the way we do business, but also for those who interact with us. So we're hoping to conclude this by the summer of 2016, where we'll have only electronic documents filed and only use electronic documents in our courthouses. So it's very exciting.
In your comments you made in the presentation earlier today, you're talking about some of the challenges, because documents that we commonly get in the trial court, I just got that yesterday in a court trial, the lawyers neglect to take out Social Security numbers, account numbers, which raises all kinds of issues about identity theft. Could you talk about what that challenge is for your office?
The exciting thing about the project is remote access. The scary thing about the project is remote access. And so we're trying to take a very deliberate and thoughtful approach as to what kind of documents would be put out there on the web for people to search and look at electronically. We're starting with our government subscribers, we call them, so public defenders and county attorneys, cities attorneys, what kind of things we'll give to them remotely. We're instituting new software to audit what people look at remotely, so that we'll be able to see that they're looking at the things they're supposed to look at. And then the Supreme Court has a rules committee that'll really be studying this issue of what is really appropriate to put out there for people to search from their home or from their office. And those rules will come out for public comment, and people will be able to say whether they think we're going too far or not going far enough. But it is something that we're taking in stages because of the fear that you mentioned.
Okay.
So the hope is that someday every citizen of this state would be able to sit at home and access certain documents that they should have access to from home. Because now people do need to travel to a courthouse, stand in line at a counter, and that's the only way that they can view things. So that is the hope and the goal of this project.
That is the hope, that we will provide more convenience, just like every other business or public entity is trying to provide convenience, because we are a on-demand, want-it-now kind of society, and the courts need to innovate and provide that kind of service just like everyone else.
One thing I wanted to get to, and we haven't touched on yet, is Chief, in announcing your decisions, are they simply published for the public, or
Yes.
do you announce them such as the U.S. Supreme Court does?
We don't have that kind of reading of the opinions that the United States Supreme Court does from time to time. Our opinions are all released on our website so that people can see them that way.
Okay.
And when are they released?
They are released on Wednesdays at 10 in the morning.
Because
everyone
we
can
get
tune in.
notice the week before that,
Yes.
look out, here comes
Here
an
it
opinion
comes.
in one of your cases. And so you can worry for a whole week about what's going to happen. Well, I've been given the high sign that we're about to wrap up. I want to thank my two guests, Chief Justice Lorie Gildea and Jeff Shorba. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For our viewers, if you have any questions or comments about this program, my email address will be in the credits at the end. You can send us questions or comments about the program. So thank you for watching the District Court Show, and we'll see you again next time.